Okay, we're going to just cover a few techniques that we're going to need in order to change the subject of a formula. So the whole idea here is you're going to have some sort of formula given to you, and you're going to change what that is, or the subject is. So it may start, for instance, as y equals something, and you need to make it x equals, and use the same algebraic skills as before in order to get there. Now, the thing to remember whenever you're rearranging the formula is to undo the last thing done to the subject each time by doing the opposite. Okay, that was quite convoluted. Let's just look at an example. So, for example, here we've got something like y equals 3x plus 2. I'm going to think to myself, what's happened to the x? Well, the first thing that happens to the x is it's multiplied by 3. The second is we add 2. So I need to undo the last thing, which was that add plus 2, by doing the opposite. So subtract 2 from both sides. So this becomes y minus 2 is equal to 3x. And the second thing, or so the first thing that was done to the x originally was it was multiplied by 3. So the last thing I'm going to do is the opposite of that. I'm going to divide by 3. So divide by 3 here, and divide by 3 here, leaving me with y minus 2 over 3 equals x. Just ensuring that this fraction covers the whole of the expression, because I needed to divide by the whole of that left-hand side. I probably should have labelled this as skill 1, so let's just put that there now as our little title here. So this is going to be skill 1. And that was essentially unlocking. So just considering the reverse operation. Skill number 2, we're going to have a go at straight away. And that's going to be when we get a subject in a negative. So, for example, what we might have here is something like y equals, let's use similar example, y equals 3 minus 2x. Now, what I urge you to do in this situation is to just add the subject to both sides. Just remove that negative, and then the process becomes a lot easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 2x. I don't want that to be a negative. And what we're left with here is 2x plus y. That equals now 3. From here, it's going to be a straightforward process to solve. Subtracting the y. And divide by 2. Now, you'll notice one of the things that's worth mentioning, it doesn't matter when my subject is on the left or on the right hand side as it was previously. Really doesn't matter at all. And in all of these situations, we're changing them to make x the subject. You need to be aware that you might get different letters to make the subject, but here we're just dealing with x's. Okay, now I'm going to encourage you to just complete a couple of questions. So here are 2 questions to have a little go at. I encourage you to pause what you're doing, hit that pause button, that's what it looks like, here, pause, and work through both of these, and I'll put the solutions up shortly. And there we are, there's our 2 solutions. First of all, x equals z squared over 3, take away 4, and here x equals b minus d over a. Do again pause, look at the moves I made in order to make this process as simple as I possibly can. Okay, next one to watch out for, skill number 3, is when the subject is trapped inside a denominator. Now, if you've got the subject that you're after on the numerator, it's quite straightforward. So let's show you a little example of that. It's a more straightforward one. Y equals x over q. if I wanted to make x the subject, I'm going to multiply by q to give me x equals yq. Now, it's a little bit more tricky if that x is in the denominator somewhere. So a trickier one might be y equals q over x plus 1. I've thrown in an extra plus 1. Now, in general, whenever you have a fraction in an equation, your instinct should be to multiply both sides by the denominator. That's exactly what we're going to do here. My denominator is the entirety of x plus 1. So when I multiply by x plus 1, I get y x plus 1 equals q. Now I can expand, in fact I don't need to expand my bracket. This is quite nice, I can just divide by y now. So x plus 1 equals q over y, and I subtract 1 to both sides, x equals q over y minus 1. And there we are. Now you may have noticed that from here, the difference from here to here is my x plus 1 has switched places with my y. X plus 1 is up here, my y is now down here. So you can kind of be quite smart about that. All you're doing is multiplying by one side and then one thing dividing by the other, and they kind of switch positions. So if I give you another example, let's use a pen. So we've got c equals b over 4 minus 2x. Multiply both sides by the denominator, divide by this thing here, and my next move can look like this. 4 minus 2x equals b over c. Now now we've got this trapped negative like we talked about previously. So I'll add 2x to both sides. I get 4 minus b over c equals 2x. I've done two moves again. I've added this to both sides, subtracted this from both sides, and we now need to divide by 2 to both things. So I get 4 over 2 minus b over 2c. That gives me x. 4 over 2 is 2 minus b over 2c. That equals, that should be an x there, equals x. Next we've got skill number 4, which is going to be cross multiplying. A lot of you know about this, but let's write it out. So this is the basic idea. You can do this when you have just a fraction on each side of the equation. You can do what's called cross multiplying, which means this thing goes up here and this thing goes up here. Be careful, people fall into the trap of cross multiplying when there's an expression, when there's extra terms. You can't do it. It's only in this situation where you've got a fraction and only a fraction on each side of your equal sign. So let's just clear that out there. What we end up with is a multiplied by d equals c multiplied by b. Tidy that up. There we are. So again, a little example where this might be handy. If you're asked to make x the subject of this one, which is a plus 1 over b equals c over x. Okay, let's cross multiply. I get x multiplied by a plus 1 and c multiplied by b. Now, don't fall into the trap of expanding the bracket. It's going to create a lot of work for you. All you need to do is now divide by a plus 1. So x equals bc over a plus 1. And we're done. Okay, again, we're going to use that pause button in a second and have a little go at these two questions here. And again, what I'll do is I'll reveal the answers and you can check your workings, see what I've done and see how it's gone. So do press pause now, have a little go at these two questions. Okay, there we are. Do press pause again, check your two answers. I've underlined them both now. F cubed brackets a plus 1. I did that in two moves. That was quite a straightforward one in the end once we knew to cross multiply. The other one, just follow the steps. I've communicated all of my steps that I've made in the circles, so follow them, and this is each of my lines of working. Again, if you're unsure, we can go through these again. and I see you next. Okay, just to finish this off then, the last one, the one that people get a little bit confused about, a bit unsure about, is what happens if the subject appears multiple times. You obviously need to make it, if we're making X the subject, which we have done in all of the questions we've done so far, you need to just have a single X equals, you cannot have another one appearing in the other part of the formula. So to make X the subject, what do we do? Well, let's have a look at an example question. Something you might get would be 2x plus pi x, for instance, and that might equal 3. Well, how can we just make it these x's in different terms only appear once? The trick is to factorize. And so I need to take x out as a factor of this. So x brackets 2 plus pi equals 3. And then it's a case of dividing by 2 plus pi. So x equals 3 over 2 plus pi. So that's the process. Obviously, you've got to be ready to be asked to do a couple of things. So let's look at another question, e.g. 2. This might help you to kind of see when there's a number of things being asked of you. So to make x the subject of y equals x plus 1 over 2x. First thing I want to do, I want to multiply by that denominator. So I get 2xy equals x plus 1. Now I want all my x's on one side. I need to make x the subject, so I'm going to subtract x from both sides, focusing on this one to get it across with the other. So I'm left with 2x y, take away x equals 1. Now I need to factorize x, 2y minus 1 equals 1, and divide through by 2y minus 1, x equals 1 over 2y minus 1. Okay, let's do one more. And here I've got q equals 2x plus 1 over 2x minus 1. Okay, multiplied through by the denominator. Q lots of, that looks like a G, doesn't it? Crikey. Q lots of 2x minus 1 equals 2x plus 1. Okay, multiply out my bracket. 2qx minus q equals 2x plus 1. All my x's onto one side. 2qx minus 2x equals q plus 1. I've done two moves again. I've moved this q by adding it to both sides, so that's here, and I've subtracted this from both sides, so that's here. Okay, factorize now. X lots of 2q minus 2 equals q plus 1, and x equals q plus 1 over 2q minus 2, and that's our answer. Okay, so here are two questions for you to have a go at. Making x the subject here, and here we, just to emphasize the point, the last one we're going to do is to do one that's not going to make x the subject, instead we're going to make a. Now it's an interesting point, this actually was an exam question, and only 5% of students got full marks on this question. So do think about this as you press pause and work through it, see if you can be one of those amazing 5%. And what I'll do, I'll flash up the answers in a second. So do hit pause now. And there we have our solution. First of all, on this left hand side, x equals 2 over 1 minus a. And on the right hand side here, pn minus n squared all over 1 minus p. Process was to multiply this one up, expand the bracket, get all my a's onto one side, my terms involving a, and my terms involving n on the other, p and n's, and or basically other stuff, not a's. Factorize here to give this, and then divide through by 1 minus p, and there we are with our answer. Well done if you got that. With that, those skills and those tools at your disposal, we should be able to make a good start on the questions in class on Wednesday. Well done.